Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reading the Fundamentals. Reading is Lit, now known as the Literary Minute, with me, Professor Stephanie Johnson, also known as The Write, WRITE Professor. This is episode 9, and I've entitled it Constitutional Literacy, in response to the different arguments and counter arguments that have emerged with regard to the Take a Knee movement impacting the NFL and our sports entertainment industry, as well as our government. During the last NFL season, 2016 through 2017, Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, decided not to stand during the national anthem. Instead, he decided to kneel after being seated for a while. He decided to kneel in protest, in a peaceable protest, regarding how African Americans and people of color are being treated in the United States of America with regard to the injustice and the systematic injustice that takes place. There's lots of background information regarding why he eventually started taking a knee, even having consulted with or spoken to a member of the U.S. military who told him and advised him that taking a knee is actually showing respect to the flag during the national anthem as opposed to not doing anything. With no slight at all to the reason why Colin Kaepernick and eventually some of the other NFL players also began taking a knee during the national anthem, with no slight to the reasoning for the protest, of course the conversation always goes back to the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. According to Amendment 1, a United States citizen has 5 basic rights: the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, 3, freedom of the press, 4, freedom or the right to peaceably assemble, and 5, the freedom to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What this means is that the government itself cannot come against a U.S. citizen or infringe upon their First Amendment rights in any way with regard to religion, with regard to free speech, with regard to the freedom of the press, with regard to the peaceably assembling to protest, and with regard to the redress of grievances with the government itself, which leaves to question other entities. But before we move on to that, when we talk about government, we know the 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. But in addition to that, we know that government just does not mean federal government. It also means state government. It also means local government in terms of the county and the city. Way back in 1943, in the case of the West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett, the Supreme Court ruled that it is unconstitutional. It goes against a student's First Amendment rights to be compelled to salute the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Of course, the Board of Education is an offshoot of the county government. In addition to that, the school in that particular case was a public school. But what about private schools? We know that private schools, they have their governorship, and their governorship reports to who? The Board of Education. So are they not a part of the government or should be accountable to the government as well? If so, can it be concluded that even private schools should not be allowed to compel students to stand, salute the flag, and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I think there needs to be a re-examining of regulations for private schools as well. Because if those regulations are not in alignment with the Constitution, the basic rights and privileges of a U.S. citizen, then not only should they be re-examined, it should be challenged, and it should be ruled against. All right, so how about businesses, private organizations, and private corporations? Do they not pay taxes? Are they not accountable to the IRS, which is a part of the federal government? That means they should also be held accountable if their rules and regulations are not in alignment with the Constitution. Again, the law of the land that lays out the basic rights and provisions of every U.S. citizen. If those rules and regulations of a private business do not align with the Constitution, they should be brought into question as well, challenged, and overturned. What also needs to be examined in terms of students: codes of conduct for student athletes, and to be able to participate in any type of extracurricular or curricular activity. If a student has to sign a code of conduct, and because they're under 18, maybe their parents also have to sign, or their guardian would have to sign, those codes of conduct also need to be re-examined. If they have any caveat in there that is not in alignment with the Amendment 1 rights of the students, that needs to be questioned, because again, it's not in alignment with the basic fundamental rights that a U.S. citizen would have in our country. And how about the U.S. flag code? The flag code stipulates that no one can deface the flag that represents the ideals and the vision of the United States of America. Well, kneeling to a flag definitely doesn't do that. It doesn't deface it. Kneeling is not obscene. Kneeling is not disruptive, in my opinion. Kneeling is not an act of treason. So therefore, kneeling in protest under the Amendment 1 right to protest and to peaceably assemble, guess what? It's covered. And the brave men and women of our United States military, they swear to uphold the ideals of the Constitution itself. Of course, they would never disrespect the flag, but they swear to uphold the Constitution. And in so doing, they swear to also uphold the amendment rights within the Constitution, including Amendment 1. So even with that, by not allowing a U.S. citizen to exercise their freedoms according to the Constitution, which the United States military also swears to uphold, you're disrespecting the military. What is so troubling about this entire conversation is the real disrespect that's taking place. Not disrespect towards the military, not disrespect towards the police, not disrespect towards the flag. But what has been disrespectful is how the conversation has been deflected from the real issue. The real issue is the systematic injustice, the systematic oppression, and the police brutality against African Americans and people of color in this country. Deflecting the real issue is the disrespect. Deflecting the real issue and redirecting the conversation to the First Amendment is used because some still cannot or will not empathize with even the factual evidence that has been presented over and over and over again, supporting arguments regarding the vast injustice, the systematic injustice, and the systematic oppression of Black people in this country. These same individuals continually and systematically ignore the logic of the issue and pass off facts and evidence as pathological manipulation of reality, when the true travesty is in the further denial of actuality. This country has a serious problem. What is grossly problematic are the severe inconsistencies and the continual hypocrisy that is taking place. We claim to have founded this country on biblical or Christian principles. We don't follow them. We claim to have laid down a constitution of sound law and legal ideas and philosophies that all men are created equal, but it's still not happening. The behavior is inconsistent with the vision. So, what's the solution? Although not simple, it starts with being consistent with the spirit of the Constitution. We know historically that when the Constitution was written, it excluded a whole race of people, a whole class of people, those who at the time were considered slaves, but they were actually enslaved human beings. We knew that they were human. They knew that they were human. They just convinced themselves otherwise. A different type of pathology, if you will, that denies reality and actuality. By exhibiting behavior that is consistent with the spirit of the Constitution, we progress from being this hypocritical democratic republic into a true democratic republic for the people who appoint leadership, but that is still created for the betterment of all of its people. This has been episode 9 of Reading the Fundamentals. Reading is Lit, now known as the Literary Minute, with me, Professor Stephanie Johnson, also known as The Wright, WRITE, Professor. Remember, reading is lit, so be lit.